If you can just give me a minute, so let me just straighten some files over here. How was your spring break?
Pretty good.
Not long enough.
That's true. But again, don't you get tired just sitting home doing nothing? All right. So I'm going to start now. Now, so far, we've been using Photoshop. We've been using Illustrator. There is a lot more to learn in these programs. Photoshop is such a big program. I've been using Photoshop since version 1, and I don't consider myself to be an expert. I'm still learning. Every time you learn something new, there's something new comes out. And Photoshop, grew from a fairly elaborate program into a humongous program now. And there are so many different things you can do in Photoshop. Same goes with Illustrator. So Illustrator has been around for a long time. So rather, Illustrator was the program with which Adobe started. And so it has been around, and it has been growing. So we can't cover everything in this class. This is the intro class. But at least we saw some of the basics we can do with these software packages. Now, these two programs, Photoshop as well as Illustrator, they are programs to create content, like visual content. Like in Photoshop, you are mostly creating raster images, or you are editing raster images, you are manipulating them, you are changing them, you are color correcting, you are fixing pictures, you are even creating animations. We didn't touch on that. Maybe later on in this class, we are going to create a small animation over there. Photoshop is widely used in the medical field, like MRIs and CT scans and all the imagery. The basic photo engine in the background is Photoshop to do that. You can also work with 3D in Photoshop. So there's a lot which can be done. Illustrator, once again, we didn't go too much into it, but we need to understand that in Illustrator, basically we are creating drawings which are vector drawings. So we saw the difference between the raster imagery and the vector imagery. Images which are made up of pixels, or images which are made up of vectors in Illustrator. Now there is a little bit of an overlap between the programs too, because you can also create some vector information in Photoshop. You can create shape layers in Photoshop, but it works slightly different than how it works in Illustrator. And Illustrator gives you much more flexibility to work with vector. Things like, if you have a magazine cover and there's a cover image, so obviously the image for the cover you are going to edit in Photoshop. But if you have to create a masthead or the logo of that magazine or logo of any company, you will like to create that in Illustrator, because vectors are good in scaling uh, images or graphics. So scalability factor is the most important thing when you're working with vector objects. Another thing about vectors is that file sizes are much smaller. And if you create, let's say, an animation using raster imagery, your file size will be very big as compared to vectors, because each and every cell of the animation uh, in a raster imagery, you will have to put all those pixels in there. So each pixel has its own number, and so that's why the file sizes become larger. In the early days of web development, there were not many tools in which you could create animations. And one of the ways to create animations was to create GIF animations. But at that time, the animations which we used to make were like tiny, almost like we used to call it as postage stamp size animations. If you go any larger, and the networks were so slow that those files were not loading fast enough. Then came programs like Flash for animations, and Flash gave us the ability to work with vectors. And now you could use vectors to create animations, which took very less bandwidth on the networks, and the file sizes was smaller. Not just that, but you can scale what you are creating on the screen. You can view it large, and so at that time, programs like Flash became really, really popular on the internet. Now we have much faster connections, so we are seeing GIF animations coming back, and we can, there are a lot of these GIF loops available, so people create memes, and also they can create these little animations to describe things, like how to use certain things. So you can create those loops, and even just for fun. Now, other things which Photoshop and Illustrator are creating is basically like creating those images, okay, which we can use in other programs like InDesign. Okay, so today we will be opening InDesign the first time, and we are going to be looking into what InDesign can do for us. So in simple words, if you want to understand where InDesign comes in this whole area, so Photoshop, we will be editing photos, we will be creating paintings, we will be creating artwork, which is pixel based. Then in Illustrator, we can work with vector drawings in order to create some simple shapes, or we can create logos, we can even create good typography in Illustrator. But how about if we have to deal with uh, projects where we are not just dealing with one image or one book cover or a magazine cover or something, we are dealing with a whole book, okay? Or we are dealing with the whole magazine, like 30-page magazines or 50-page magazine or 100-page book, 200-page book, okay? So can you create a 100-page book in Photoshop? No. Can you create that in Illustrator? No, it will be very difficult. But then InDesign is a program which can help us work with multiple pages at the same time. Okay. Now, if we start describing, you may want to write it down. So Photoshop falls in the paint category of programs, whereas Illustrator falls in the drawing category of programs, and InDesign will fall in page layout program. So InDesign's tools are really good in helping us not just designing pages, but setting up the layouts. And you can set up multiple master pages, which serve like a template. And based on those templates, for example, if for a book, you have if you open a book, so there's a page on the right-hand side, there's a page on the left-hand side. Okay, so you can create templates for your right and left pages, and those are called the master pages, which can be applied to all the other pages. And you can set up a consistent layout of a book or a magazine in such a way. So paint programs, illustration programs, and then page layout programs, where this is where your desktop publishing comes in. So that's the old, really old terminology from the start of this field. So that is the desktop publishing. So rather than publishing in a print shop, you can now publish electronically sitting on the desktop. So if you have to design a book or design a magazine, or design an annual report for a company, or even designing a multi-page brochure, in that case, you are going to use Adobe InDesign. Okay, now that is fine, but at the same time, some of the images which we can use, let's say in a magazine or a book cover, so those will be edited in Photoshop. So we are creating content which can be plugged into an InDesign document. Same goes with simple illustrations or simple shapes and simple drawings which we can create, or logos which we can create in Illustrator, which can go into InDesign. Okay, so this is just a little preview, but let's open InDesign. Let me share my screen with you and see if I can see all my. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to open InDesign. So if you notice right down here, so Adobe InDesign 2020. Now, as we are opening this program, so just a little bit of history. InDesign was based on another program Adobe used to have, which is called PageMaker. Okay, so as I mentioned before, that this is a page layout program. So PageMaker was one of the early desktop publishing programs, but it was created by another company called Aldus. And as we are familiar with Adobe, so as we are familiar with Adobe, uh, so Adobe has grown into a big company. So what they have been doing is, if they find a good software which can work good with their own existing software packages, they are going to go and buy it. Okay, and Adobe is becoming larger and larger and larger, and right now, Adobe software packages in this industry, so they are the industry standard. So they are controlling everything. Two things over here. Good thing is that uh, you, these Adobe software packages work very well with each other. Bad thing is that now Adobe has the monopoly. So if you need to work in the industry, so you have to use their program. You have to subscribe them. Before we could buy a software, and if you want to upgrade, so if it was up to us, but now you subscribe. So again, the nature of the industry is changing, but this is where we are going with that. But anyway, so I just opened my InDesign. And if you notice, just like in any other Adobe software packages, so it opens up with this window, we call it a welcome window. Sometimes, if you are a user of these software packages, these welcome windows make it a little easy for novice users, or if you're just starting with the program. So it helps you, for example, hey, you know what, if you want to create something for iPad, or if you want to create something for web, or letter size, print document, or custom size. So you can start with that. By saying that, so if you notice that iPad and web pages, so you can also do layouts for iPads and web pages, and I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later on, because as other Adobe software packages, InDesign has also grown into a program in which you can not just do print projects, but you can do other projects even for web and mobile devices. Not just that, but you can also create assets for animations and so on. You can also work with 3D objects. Um, oh, actually, sorry, you can't work in 3D objects, but you can import 3D objects in InDesign. And so, but you can create interactive multimedia content in InDesign. But that comes later on, so we need to understand what this program is. So this welcome window, if you know what you're doing, then at that time this welcome window at one point will become like a unwelcome window. So you don't want to deal with that. You would just go to your file menu and say, hey, I want to create a new document. So if you notice, what can we do over here? We can create a new document, or we can create a book, or if we have something new in the library. So at this time, I'm just going to create a new document over here. Okay, so if I click on new, so now this is the window which we want to see over here. Okay, so if you have been working with a recent document, so those parameters are going to show over here. Okay. Then there are also some recent items which if I have worked on those, so they will be available over here, so I can open. Okay, but what I want to do at this time is I want to create a print document. So I'm going to click on print. So now there are certain templates which Adobe provides us with. Say, hey, you know what, I want to create a brochure. This is going to be a three-fold brochure. So there's a template for that. So, or if you are creating a simple newsletter, or if you're so you can go and see, you know, if there are any templates which can give you a good starting point. Okay. The same goes with the web project. So it's going to give you some presets or templates for web as well as for mobile. But in our case, I'm just going to click on print. And over here, these parameters, now if you notice that I can name my documents. Okay, so I'll just call it my first InDesign doc. Okay, so you can call it anything you want. Okay, so width and the height. Now, if you notice, the width is 51p, which are picas over here. So that's another unit of measurement, okay, which is showing up right here. This is the default unit of measurement which print industry uses in order to describe the pages or image sizes and stuff in the print world. Now, this is a really not a very common way of measuring things, but if you are in print industry, so picas are going to make sense. But in our case, we are going to change the unit of measurement from picas into inches. So now if you notice that there are other units of measurements over here, like millimeters, centimeters, I'm not even sure what this unit is. Cicero's, or these, these are just new units showing up. So I'm not even familiar, but yes, I'm familiar with pixels. So if you are creating documents for web, so you will use pixels at that time. So, but in this case, I'm just going to change that to inches. Okay. Now, if you notice that since I clicked on print, by default, InDesign is giving me 8.5-inch by 11-inch documents. Okay, which is a standard page size in the United States, standard paper which we use in desktop printers. Okay, so then we can choose the orientation. Okay, so do you want your pages of your document to be vertical or portrait or landscape or horizontal? Okay, then you have choice of how many pages do you want. Okay, so if I want 100 pages document, I can create a 100-page document. If you just want, let's say, if you want to leave it for 1 page, or if you can create 2 pages or 4 pages. So I'm going to choose 4 over here, just to start with. And then there's a checkbox over here which says facing pages. What does that mean? So facing pages means just like when you open a book, there is 1 page on the left side, 1 page on the right side. Okay, so those are facing pages. So if you close the book, those pages will be facing each other. Okay, so if I choose facing pages, so if I open a book, so facing pages, we are going to call it as a spread or a magazine. So if we open the magazine, so page on the left side, page on the right side, we are going to, when we are looking at it collectively, we are going to say this is a page spread, left page and the right page. So if I'm choosing 4 pages, so in other words, InDesign is going to create 2 spreads for us. Okay, so that is fine. So I'm going to keep that over here. Okay, so then you can number your pages. Okay, start your page at number 1, or for example, if you're doing a magazine and you don't want to count the cover page as page 1, then you can start with the page which is inside as page 1, and so on. So you can start numbering accordingly. Okay, so I'm just going to go down here, and this is important over here. You can set up your columns. If you notice that, in a magazine, your text doesn't go from left to right. So in magazines, you may have 3-column text or 4-column text. So this is where you define your columns. So I'm just going to change this to 3 columns. Okay. Then there is a column gutter. Gutter is the space between those columns. So how much space? So by default, InDesign is giving me 0.16 inches. I'm going to leave it for right now, but if I want to change this, so if I want to say, hey, you know what, I want the gutter space to be 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so what is 1/8 of an inch in points? So that is going to be 0.125. Okay, so let's just make it 0.125. Okay, so that's 1/8 of an inch. All right, then we can set up our margins. Margins are very important. When you create these documents, you don't want to type too close to the edges of the paper, especially for print projects. If you have your text too close to the edges, first of all, it's very hard to read. Secondly, when it goes through the commercial printing project, uh, uh, where your projects are not just print on already cut sheets, but they are printed on larger sheets and then those are trimmed. And in the trimming process, you don't want the important text to get cut off by accident. So margins become very important in print documents. So you can set up those margins. Right now, by default, it has been set to uh, 0.5 inches. But let's say if on top I want to give little more margin on pages, so I'll say, how about make it 1 inch over here. Now, if you notice that when I change 1 inch, so uh, the top, bottom, inside, and outside pages, okay, or margins were changed to inches and 1 inch. So hey, I just wanted to change the top margin only. It is doing this because there's a link option over here, and this is highlighted. This is checked at this point. So if I click on unlink, so now you notice that the link is broken, and now I can go in individually. But I'm just going to link them together and change this back to 0.5. And then I'm going to unlink and then make it 1 inch. So that I just cut down my steps rather than going and changing each and every field over here. Now, if you remember when we were working in Illustrator, so we talked about bleed. So you can also set up those bleeds over here for these pages. By default, you will have no bleed, but I'm going to make 0.125 bleed, so that is 1/8 of an inch. So that's sort of a standard in the industry all the way around. Okay, that is fine. But since we are doing spreads, okay, so for the inside and outside, you don't need a bleed over here. So I'm just going to change this back to 0. So I'm going to unlink and then 0 and then 0. Okay. Oops. Okay. So I just clicked over here and it has created a new document. Now, if you look at my interface, okay, so now we are into InDesign. We were able to create a new document, and now you will say Hassan, I don't see more pages. I can only see one page over here. Yes, I can see those columns which we created. We started with 3 columns. The space between the columns, which is the gutter space, is 0.125, and then the top margin is 1 inch. The left and the right margins are 1/2 inch over here. And then if you notice, there is also this red line over here. I think I went a little too fast and I didn't put the outside bleed. So this red line is the bleed area over here. Okay. Now, once again, so at this point, so you will say, Hassan, I don't see more pages over here. So what's going on? So before I show you those pages, let's look at the interface. Okay. Just like in any Adobe program, on the left-hand side, you have the tools panel. Okay, so this is a floating tool panel, so you can move it, and you can either dock it on the left side, or you can just put it any way you want. Okay, so that is very convenient. So you don't have to go all the way to the left to be selecting tools. I think the best way to select tools will be if you remember your keyboard shortcuts. For example, if I press T on my keyboards, it selects the text tool. Okay, so what is the keyboard for the selection tool? It is V. So if I press V, it goes to the selection tool. So every tool, or almost every tool, will have its own keyboard shortcut. So if you start working in this software, and it's a good idea to remember those keyboard shortcuts. You can't remember everything, but I will suggest is best way is project by project basis. So if in one project, if there is one tool you use a lot, try to find a keyboard shortcut for that. Okay, and that's how you can slowly build your shortcut vocabulary, and you can remember those. All right, so on top, this is the taskbar. And this taskbar is dependent upon what is selected over here. So right now there is nothing selected. But if you notice that when I click and drag my mouse, okay, so there are certain numbers which are changing over here. So this is showing the X and the Y values. So the X, that is the horizontal, Y the vertical, and where this horizontal and vertical meet, so that is the point on this paper, okay, which InDesign is telling you, so where you are exactly on this paper, okay. And so if you notice that since we set up our units of measurements in inches, so I can see those coming down in the taskbar for me. So, and also the ruler which you are looking at, just like Illustrator and Photoshop, there is also a ruler, the top ruler and the left ruler in InDesign. Okay, it is also set to inches. Now, good thing about this is sometimes you have to measure things, okay, maybe in centimeters or millimeters or points, okay. So in that case, you are going to right click on the ruler itself. And this is where you can also change your units of measurements. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you change the units of measurement over here, it is just done for this particular document. Okay, so it's not that you're changing the settings of InDesign itself. So every time you open, so it will be the same. If you want to do that, then you can also change your units in preferences. So if you go to InDesign menu, and from here you can choose preferences, and then you can go and change the units and increments. And over here, you can decide, if you're going to use inches or picas or centimeters or millimeters. So if you do that, then every time you open InDesign, so your computer will remember what units to use. So anyway, so this is a taskbar. So it shows you maybe where your cursor is, and if you have anything on paper. Right now I have nothing on the paper other than my guides. So I'm going to grab a simple rectangle over here. And if I draw a rectangle, let's say I'll draw a rectangle within this column over here, okay? So at this time, when I draw this rectangle, so taskbar is going to show me the parameters for that selected object. So if you notice when when I'm moving my cursor, my X and Y values are not changing because it is showing me the X and Y values of this selected object. Also, if you notice, there is no fill or stroke color over here. So if I change the fill color to, let's use this magenta over here, okay. So it is showing me the colors of that selected object. So if I press the V key to get to the selection tool, and then just click anywhere outside. Okay, so once I click outside, if you notice that the colors are not showing over here because those colors were of the selected object over here. And all these other parameters over here are dependent upon what is selected and what you want to change. All right. So on your right-hand side, there are certain panels. And let me just change my settings back to, remember, on the upper right-hand corner, just like any other Adobe software, so you have some presets of how your interface is. So I'm going to say, please reset essentials. So goes back to the default values of InDesign. Okay, and one thing I noticed is that my taskbar is gone. I've been using InDesign for a long time. I don't actively use that because I'm not from the print side, but I've been around. So one thing I really like in the interface was that taskbar, and if you notice, the taskbar has gone. Okay, so what happened over here? So if you notice this essentials, this is the new default of InDesign. Okay, and if I go back to click on this drop down menu, so there is also Essentials Classic. Okay, so that was the classic way. That's what I'm used to, and since I see everything right in front of my eyes, so I like to work with Essential Classic. Okay, so when I do this, it goes back to Essential Classic. But what I need to do is to reset Essential Classic over here. Okay, so this goes back to the defaults of Essential Classic, where I can also see my taskbar, I can see my tools, and on the right hand side, I can see these panels, just like in Photoshop, Illustrator. These are panels. For example, there's a swatches panel, there's colors panel, there's stroke panel, and then there is this pages panel, and that's what I wanted to show you. Okay, so if I click on pages, okay, so this panel opens up, and if I drag this out over here so that we can see it separate from all the other panels. Now, if you notice that pages InDesign is showing me page number 1, page number 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, so these are 4 pages. And if you notice that page number 2 and 3 are facing each other. So this is like that inner spread. Okay, so page 1 can be my front page, page 4 can be the back page, and inside front and back page spread, you are going to print page 2 and 3. Okay, so this is like a sort of a page, how the pages are going to be laid out in a document which has page spreads in it. Now, this is fine. So how to get to page, let's say page number 2 or page 3, if I want to work on that. So right now, if you notice that I'm working in page 1. So if I double click on page 2, it's going to take me there. Okay, and now page 2 is shown as a spread over here. So if I press my space bar, I can just move this over here. So this is my page 2, and this is going to be my page 3. Okay, so just for our own reference, so I'm just going to create another box over here and change the fill color. Let's say I want this to be blue, and then I can use my selection tool, press the Option key, and click and drag a copy of this object. Okay, so remember, Option makes a copy. How does it make a copy? So when you hover over an object and press the Option key, you get a double-headed arrow. Okay, if I let go the Option, this is a single arrow. Okay, so this is the move tool, and if I press the Option, double-headed arrow means that when I'll move now, Option drag, it's going to make a copy. Okay, so this is fine. I'm going to change color of one of these over here so that we know which page we are in. So now we have something going on over here. Now, if I scroll, I want to go to page number 4, I can go over here, or I can just simply scroll. Okay, so this is my page 1. I can scroll down to page 4 over here. Or if I'm in page 1, I want to go to page 4, I can double click over here and it takes me to page number 4 over here. Okay. And I'll just make some changes over here too. So this time I'm just going to copy and paste rather than option dragging. So select Command C to copy or edit copy. And then I'll go to this page and then paste. And let's just spread it all the way over here. Now this rectangle is meaningless over here. I'm just creating this just so that we can see the difference, what is going on. So now if we look at the pages over here, okay, so let me make these pages a little larger just in when we are looking at it. So there's a drop-down menu over here in Pages panel. And over here, I'm going to go to Panel Options. And instead of medium size, I'm going to make it large, or let's make it extra large. You can even go to the jumbo size. So extra large and say okay. So now we can look at the pages a little better over here. So it's easy to explain what is going on. So if I want to go to page 3, I can double click over here. I want to go to page 4, double click here. Page 1, double click over here. Okay, that's one thing. Now, you may say that, well, Hassan, this is not how things are going to print. Because in a commercial printing, page 2 and 3 will be printed together, okay, so on a larger sheet, but page 1 printing on a separate sheet and page 4 printing on a separate sheet doesn't make sense. So is there a way of taking page number 4 and moving it on this side of page 1? Okay, so you will notice that it doesn't happen that way. Okay, and I'll show you how to fix that. But if I want to put this page right next to page 1 on this side, okay, by default, this is not possible. So how do we do this? So in order to do this, so you're going to go to this drop-down menu in Pages panel, and there is a check mark over here on Allow Document Pages to Shuffle. I'm going to uncheck that. So at this point, if you want to write down where this thing is, because I know that students will forget and they try to fix the pages and they will say, hey, you know what, Hassan, how did we do this? So uncheck Allow Document Pages to Shuffle by just selecting it once. So now when I go over here, you can see that check mark has gone. So now if I take my page number 4 and put it right next to this over here and release. So there is page 1, 2, page 3, 4. But this becomes like page number 1 becomes like a front page of a magazine. Let's say if it's a 4-page magazine. So front page and the back page. Inner page on the left side, inner page on the right side. So when we have this page and this page together printed, and if we flip it over, and this page will be printed inside like that. I hope this makes sense. So let's say that I was saying magazine, but it's a 4-page brochure. Okay. So if it's a brochure, so this is the front page of the brochure, this is the last page of the brochure, and these are the inner pages. Okay. So far what we have done is we are looking at, in design, we were able to create 4 pages, which is actually 2 spreads. And so InDesign is also telling you what is going on. So your document has 4 pages, and 2 spreads. So now we'll say, hey, you know what? Actually, we wanted more pages in this project. Instead of 4, I want 8 pages. So what do I do? Okay. So what we do is, after page number 4, we can add more pages. Just like new layer icon in Illustrator and Photoshop, there's a icon over here with the little plus sign in there. So if I click, it adds a page. Okay. Now, if you notice, if I just add one more page, it doesn't make sense. If I add another page, so it adds another page over here. Now, I don't want this other page to be on the right side over here. So I'm not creating a really long horizontal page which can be folded. So I want this page number 6 to be on the other side over here. So I can fix that. The only reason why I can fix that is because I have allowed document pages to shuffle unchecked. Okay. If this is checked, then you will not be able to do this. Now, if you want to add more pages, okay, there are other ways of adding pages. Obviously, we want to add 2 more pages. If I go to this drop-down menu, okay, and from here, we can choose Insert Pages. And a little dialog box will open up. Over here, we can say, hey, you know what, how many pages do we want to insert? Do we want to insert 2 more pages or 4 more pages, or 8 pages or 16 more pages or so on? So I will say, please add 2 more pages. Insert where? After page number 6. And I'll talk about master pages a little bit later on. I'll just say, okay. So it adds more pages. So once again, so it is spreading this way. So I'm going to shift select both these pages and bring them down. See if I can. It's always very tricky over here. Oh, come on. There we go. Sometimes it will give you a little hard time over here. Okay, now if you notice that I started with 4 pages and I added 4 more pages. I could have added 2 more pages, but there will be a problem with that. Okay, and the problem is that when you print 2 pages on one sheet, the back of that spread will be empty. There will be nothing. So you need 2 more pages to print on the back. Okay, so this is how pages are done in books, increments of 4. So you can have a 4-page spreads, or unless you don't want to print on the other side. So 4-page, 8-page, 12 pages, 16 pages, and so you keep adding 4 pages. All right. So this is a little bit about pages. We didn't talk about the master pages yet, so we'll talk about master pages a little bit later on. But at this time, if you scroll, you can see that you can scroll through all these pages, okay? And if you want to go to a particular page, you can just double click on that page number and it's going to take you right there. If you double click over here, so it can take you right there, okay? So another thing I'm going to add over here before we'll take a break is using your type tool. Remember creating point type? How do you create point type? You grab your type tool and just click over here one time, okay? So it creates an insertion point. So I don't know if you can see it or not. So let's try it again. So click and click and click, click, and nothing happens. Okay, so what's going on? So click, okay, so nothing is happening. Okay, so let's also check over here. So there were pages and there's also layers. And let's just bring the layers panel over here. Okay. And if you notice, there is only layer 1. And if I open layer 1, there are these 3 rectangles. Okay. But once again, when I try to create point type, okay, so nothing is happening. So in InDesign, everything should be in a container. Okay. If you're doing a text, it goes in a container. Okay. So that's what we are going to do. So with the type tool, I can just click and drag. Okay, so once we have a container, so we can fill that container with text. Okay, now I don't have any text to put in there, so guess what I'm going to do? Okay, so what going to do is go to the type menu, and I'm going to go and choose insert or fill with placeholder text. Okay, so it's going to fill with that lorem ipsum type of fake text in there, just for us to take a look at, how things look. Now, before I take a break, let me just zoom in over here. So now, if you notice that, hey, there's this hyphen over here. Remember how to turn off the hyphen? Okay, anyone remembers that in Illustrator? Or if I want, yeah. Anyone remembers? Will it be in characters panel or in paragraph panel?
Paragraph?
Yeah, it will be in paragraph panel. Okay. So same types of settings are in InDesign, but you will see that there are much more settings over here. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like the new interface. I want to look at the classic and see all these parameters which are available for me up here. Okay. So this is where you can if you notice that I have the paragraph format controls clicked over here, and okay, so this is where these are the character formatting, and you see all these options available in characters. Or if I click on paragraph, all these options in paragraph. Okay, so one thing which is common is your aligning. So if you want to align the text, so I can highlight it and say I want to align it all the way left or right, left or right or center or left or left justified. If I want to get rid of uh, uh, the hyphen over here, and hyphen checkbox is right all the way on the right hand side over here in your paragraph panel. So I can just uncheck that so it gets rid of the. So we've seen that when we were looking at typography in Illustrator, there are similar controls, and we will find there are much more controls to work with type in Illustrator. I mean in InDesign over here. Pardon? Anyone has a question? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of minute break over here. So let me just stop sharing my screen. Okay. So we are just starting to look into InDesign. Okay. InDesign is another powerful tool to create page layouts. Okay. Page layouts of documents which have multiple pages. Okay. And usually multiple pages are much more appropriate for print. Yes, you can create PDF documents. In PDF documents, you have a choice if you want to create page spreads, or you can just create a single page, which will print one at a time. And so, so I think what I'm going to do over here is one of my favorite instructors, if you remember, my favorite instructor from Adobe is Terry White. Terry White, several years ago, he did a tutorial to show you how to work with InDesign for the beginners. And he created a project, okay? So we are going to look at that video. It's not very long. I think it's like 5, 6, 10 minutes long. And I'm just going to play that. I have a copy of that, but if you are looking for Terry White videos, they will be available on, I think it's called Adobe Creative Suite podcast. Okay, so although it's a podcast, but there are also videos up there. So you can just Google it. Terry White has like hundreds of videos over there. You can go and search for, videos. But again, a lot of information over there, a lot of free stuff. And I like Terry White because he has a very uh, simple style of communicating and teaching. Uh, Terry White has been with Adobe for a long time, but he does these videos for our benefit, and these are all free, which we can access online. He also has his own, I think, YouTube channel. So if you just search for Terry White, and you will find his videos. All right, so let's see. So we are 15 people over here. Oh, by the way, guys, if you know anyone uh, who may have difficulty uh, coming to our Zoom sessions, if somebody contacts you, because all the emails I had, I already sent those, and you guys already know, how to come to the class. But last time we had one student, she was not getting my communication, and so, but we were, she was I was able to contact her, and but let's see, I don't see her here today. Okay, I'll have to send her an email again. All right. So anyway, so she contacted the office and say, hey, you know what? I have no way to communicate with my instructor. I'm sending him an email, and for some reason, I don't know if she had my email address wrong, or, but I was able to contact her. I also gave her the access to videos and stuff. Okay. So I'm just going to play this video. Actually, there are two different videos he did. One is about 13 minutes long, and the other is a little longer. I'm going to play the shorter one first because that was a little newer version. although it is an old version we are going to look at, but for the basics, I think it covers everything in InDesign. So we are not concerned with what is new in InDesign yet. So once we know the basics, so we can do this. So let me share my screen with you. And it's going to be this one. Okay, not this one. Okay, can you guys see the screen?
The Adobe Indesign?
Yeah.
QuickTime Player? Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I was having problems. I've got two monitors going on, so uh, today there was, I was tried to share one monitor, so it switched to the other earlier in my earlier class. So I don't know what was going on. So just wanted to make sure. So I'm just going to play this video, and it's a simple project. It looks simple, but if you're new to InDesign, you just have to get familiar with where things are. So we discussed a little bit of, there's a tools panel on the left-hand side. There are other panels on the right-hand side. So one of the important panels we looked at was pages. There's a taskbar, which is on top over there. So let's just play this video quickly.
Is there supposed to be audio? I don't hear anything.
You can't hear the audio?
No.
Okay, let me do this. Okay, I'm going to use the internal speakers. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Adobe Creative Suite podcast. My name is Terry White, and in this episode we're going to take a look at something I haven't done in a while, and that is I haven't done it since probably the CS3 time frame, and that is how to create a InDesign layout from scratch. In other words, starting with a empty or no document and then doing your layout. So here we go. Let's get started. So again, I have InDesign open, or just no document, and we're going to start doing a two-page spread from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new document. I can do it from the File menu or Create New Document. And it comes up with my last used defaults. I'm just going to go ahead and set it back to the default defaults. And then we'll do facing pages, which means I'll have a left and right page in my spread. I'm going to have 2 pages in my spread. And last but not least, the only other thing I'm going to change here is that I want a bleed. In other words, I want a little bit of space around the outside of the page itself, because I want images to actually go past the edge of the paper. So we're going to do that. We're going to do 1/2 inch margins all the way around. And again, 2-page spread. 5 or facing pages, and let's go ahead and say OK. Now, when we say OK, it shows us page 1. Where's page 2? Page 2 is actually the next page down. So this creates our first problem, is that I would love to have those 2 pages next to each other. The problem is, by default, InDesign shuffles pages. So if you can just keep doing this all day long in the Pages panel, and you're still going to have 2 pages that are not next to each other. So the trick here, and that is to go up to your flyout menu for your pages, and you're going to turn off allow document pages to shuffle. So we just turn that off, and now I can put the pages next to each other. Okay, so that's our first tip, just getting the 2 pages side by side. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a frame. And this frame is just going to be for my color background. Just going to go in the background. It could be a photo, it could be a color. I'm just going to make mine a color to keep it simple. And I just create the frame, and now I want to fill that frame with a color. So you should always get your colors from the swatches. If you don't have a swatch that you need, just go ahead and create a new color and then add it as a swatch. So I'm just going to fill this with red, and there's our swatch. So we got it red. Now, the only thing I don't want to do is I don't want this frame that I built to get moved, or for InDesign to think I'm trying to place things into it. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it. So I just go to the object menu, choose lock to lock it down. So InDesign now shows that this is locked. We get a new indicator in CS5 and CS5.5 letting us know that's locked. And anytime you want to unlock it, just click the little lock icon. Okay, now that that's there, I want to grab my image that I want to place on that page actually and have it go across the spread. So I'm going to go to my mini bridge panel, again introduced in CS5, and the mini bridge will take me to my last folder, or you can navigate to whatever folder you need to go to, and there's the image I want. So just go ahead and drag it right in from mini bridge, and it's letting me place it. I can put mini bridge away for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and go a little bit off the page here and just drag. And again, I don't have to hold down anything. It automatically makes it proportional now in CS5 and CS5.5. Okay, so our subject came in. I wanted her actually a little bit more over to the left-hand side here, and I want her hand to be on the next page. And she's bleeding off very nicely here, off to the edge of the paper. However, I do want her to be a little taller. So I'm going to zoom out, Command minus to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to hold down Command and Shift on Mac PC. That would be Control Shift, so that I can scale it proportionally now that it's been placed. Okay, great. So we got our image in place. The next thing we're going to do is start placing objects around it. And those objects are actually going to be text. So I'm going to go up to my File menu. I could do it from Mini Bridge, or I could do it from File Place. You can do it either way. I'll just go ahead and grab this since it's right here in the bridge window. And I get my first problem that we need to solve. It's letting me know that the font Chaparral Pro regular bold is not installed on this machine or this user account. And I could install it and activate it, go find it, but just so you can move on, you can also say find font and replace it with whatever font you do have. Now, of course, that can change the way that it looks, change the line ending, so forth and so on. But in this case, it's okay. But you would usually want the font that was used if you're placing that font or placing that document in that font's important. But if you're grabbing a Word document, then they may have used a font that you could care less about. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this text here. And the text is so small that it's called Greek text. It's actually just giving me gray bars instead of the actual text, instead of having the computer try and render it. So I'm going to hit the Command plus sign. PC, that would be Control plus, so I can zoom in. Great, and now I'm just going to go ahead and just move this frame up a little bit because it doesn't need to be as big as it was. We move the text down, and there's the word stats would be nice here because that's what this is, but it wasn't a part of the text. That's okay. I can go ahead and create a new frame, and I can bring it up as high as I want, make that new frame about the same length. Then I can type in the word stats. However, it comes in its default size, default color. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. We'll go ahead and change the swatch to make it white, which is paper. And we'll go ahead and make it bigger. We can either do it from the menu, You can type in a size if you know the exact size, or you can do it my favorite way, which is visually, which on the Mac, that would be Command-Shift, PC, that would be Control-Shift, and the greater than symbol, which is right above your period. Okay, so now I can make that as big as I want. Less than will make it smaller. I got that in place. Everything looks great. All right, next, let's go ahead and move over now. We'll scroll over to the right-hand side of the spread here. And there are a couple things I want to do here. First, I'm going to move her over just a little bit more. I want to put a big, giant letter I here. And I'm going to place some text next to it. The text does not have the letter I. It just starts off with thoughts. And I'm going to say, or I want this basically to say, I thought, of course, part of the text. So let's go ahead and create another frame. We'll just make a nice, giant, skinny frame here with our text tool or type tool. And we'll just type capital I. Now, same thing. I want that to be bigger. So I hit Command A to highlight it or drag across it to highlight it. And PC, that'd be Control A. And I don't know how big to make it. Is it 24 points? Nope, not big enough. Is it 36 points or 48 points? Not big enough. So my favorite way, Command-Shift Mac, PC Control-Shift, and just keep hitting the period, which is greater than, until I get it big enough. Now, at some point, it's going to disappear because I made it too big to fit in that skinny frame. So just go less than to bring it back down in size. So I've got my giant I. Actually, it doesn't need to be that tall. And next thing I want to do is bring in the text that's going to go next to that. So we'll just go ahead and grab our text from Mini Bridge here. There's the I thought text. We'll just drag it in. Oops, but I let go in that frame. So it replaced my image. Let's undo. Now let's try it one more time. There we go. And now we'll just go ahead and drag out a frame right about there. And there's our I thought text. Now, the problem is I don't want that text to cover the hand. I kind of would love it if it would wrap around the hand, which means I want to do a text wrap on my photo. Now, you can do a text wrap on a photo that's been cut out like this. As you notice, this photo has no background. That's why we can still see the red. That's why we can see it kind of bleed off. So it came from Photoshop with the background already knocked out, but it doesn't know how to do a text wrap. So let's do that. Let's select the photo. With the photo selected, let's go to our text wrap panel, which will be under your view menu. And the text wrap I want is the irregular wrap. Now it's gonna cause a problem. So the minute I click it, everything disappears because it doesn't know that I want it to wrap around the photo itself. So it thinks I want it to wrap around everything, this whole bounding box. So everything disappeared because it's trying to wrap. We're gonna fix that. First thing we need to do is, instead of saying same as clipping, which is the default, we're gonna change it to, we can either do Photoshop Path if there is one, or my alpha channel would work too. But in this case, I'm just gonna have Photoshop detect the edges of the pixels that are there. So it did it, and it brought back everything I need, including wrapping the text nicely around the hand. So again, because I'm doing it around the photo, this is not interfering with the photo, the eye's not interfering with the photo, just the text coming around the hand. So that worked out great. So we can put text wrap away. Last but not least, I have some text to go down here, and actually we can make this frame a little smaller. We don't need it to be as big as it is. Great. So we'll just go back to Mini Bridge one more time. We have this local feature text. We'll drag, oh, see, I did it again. I keep dragging in that frame. Now that's why we lock things. So if I lock that, it wouldn't let me do it. Let's undo. And yep, we need to drag it in one more time, but just don't let go inside of the frame, like go outside of the frame. Then you're good. Okay, so now, even though I let go outside of the frame, I can now move into the frame and drag out my new frame for my text. Now, I don't know how that text is going to look. Let's zoom in on it. Again, Command+. And while this would be okay, I'd love for this text to be in 2 columns. So we'll just go ahead and go up on the number of columns to 2. And I want it a little bit more balanced. So we can do it a couple ways. We can make the frame shorter. We can make the frame skinnier. And that would kind of balance it out. Right about there. Okay, and then we can move the frame where we want, kind of center it right there on that line, or we can, doesn't have to be centered on that line. And if we start moving it up, it'll start wrapping around the arm. So that's actually kind of a cool effect. Why don't we do that? And we'll just balance that out a little bit more. Now, when I did it, it pushed some of the text and we got this red plus sign. That's letting me know that there's text that isn't being displayed because the frame is too small. So I can go ahead and just pull that down a little bit to display that, or I can make the frame a little wider to accommodate that extra text. And I think that looks much, much better. So there you have it, in a matter of a few minutes, going from no document to an InDesign document laid out. Now, if I want to kind of see it without these bounding boxes and blue lines, I can do the preview mode, which is down here in the toolbar, or just hit the letter W as long as you have the text tool. And this is the way our document will look printed. You can zoom in on it a little bit so we can read it, but that looks great, except the photo doesn't look all that great. It looks kind of jagged. And that's because by default, InDesign does a typical display. So if we highlight the photo, we can go up to our object menu, display performance, high quality display to kind of render that photo a little bit better. Now we're looking at it the way it would look printed. We click off the photo, the blue line goes away. So I hope you learned something, or at least just how InDesign works. It's really just as easy as I did it. Drag and drop, move things around, size them, get them the way you want. Don't be afraid to kind of think outside of the box by making frames for specific letters or text that you want to be outside of the story that you placed. InDesign will place Word files, RTF files, ASCII text files that contain all your text, or you can just drag out a type frame, or type with your type tool, drag out a frame, and type into it just like I did the word stats or the letter I. Your choice. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Adobe Creative Suite podcast. My name is Terry White. Thanks for watching.
All right, guys. So this video I'm going to put in the assets folder, although since it's a free video available on the net, so I think we should be okay. And also, I'm going to put another video. So that is actually earlier video than this. It's a little longer than this, so you may watch it on your own time. And so that's going to make make you a little more familiar with the software. Okay. A couple of things. If you may have taken notes or remember, just if you have any object you want to lock in InDesign, so the keyboard shortcut is straightforward. That is Command L. In Illustrator, remember, we were locking by using Command 2. So in InDesign, it's a little easy. So Command L. Another thing is if you're trying to scale your text, you can also use keyboard shortcuts. That is Command Shift, and then you can use greater to or lesser to sign in order to change the size. Now, if your text is a little too small on the screen, okay, so the text becomes unreadable, okay. So your software is going to show you gray lines rather than text. That process is called Greeking. Okay, the term is coming from traditional printing, but basically those gray bars, they mean that your text is a little too small. So if you zoom in, then you start seeing those. So I do want you to remember the term, because this is used quite in the industry. Another thing which I do want to mention is that in InDesign, every element which goes on the page is put in some sort of a container. Okay? If there is an image, okay, so you create a container first and you drag the image in there. If you just drag the image in the document, the image will go in. But if you will also notice that InDesign automatically creates a object or container for it. So in order to scale the image, so when you're scaling the image, make sure to also press the command key. Okay, if you grab one of the side handles and try to scale, if you press the command key and then scale, so the image will also scale. If you don't press the command key, only the container is going to be scaled. Okay, so everything, just remember, everything in InDesign goes inside the container. Okay. Another thing I want to mention was, so these containers, or they are called frames in InDesign. If you bring an image, just like the one which we saw in Terry White's video, the background was knocked out. Okay, so it was done in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, you select the background, you delete the background, and then you save your file. At this time, what is important is how you save your file. Okay, so in which format you are going to save your file. So the formats which support transparency are EPS and PNG. So PNG is a newer format, and it is now widely being used in the industry. So PNG file format, and if you remember, there are two different versions of PNG. There's PNG 8-bit and PNG 24-bit. So make sure to use the PNG 24-bit to get a higher quality of transparency in your image. If you have any questions about that, I can also answer that. But format is important. For example, JPEG file format will not support transparent information. GIF file format will support transparency, but in Photoshop, the only way of saving that will be when you export in a save for web. So that is a legacy format. And but I won't recommend saving your transparent information in GIF, because that's a very low quality transparency. So if you need quality, then PNG 24 is the format in which you are going to save. So InDesign has the ability to look at the transparent information, and when you're doing a wraparound, so you can easily wrap around your text by just clicking one button, just like in the video itself. Last thing I think which Terry White also showed is that if you notice that the image which he brought in looked really jagged, that is InDesign's way of showing your images at a lower quality by default. The reason why InDesign does that is if you notice that this program can support many pages. Let's say if your document has 100 pages, and if you start bringing in full quality images, then your file size will become too big to handle. So, what you need to understand is that when you bring an image in InDesign, it is linked, and it is linked to its original high quality image. Okay, but if you want to see that in a better format, so what you do is you go to the object menu, and from object menu, if I remember, so it is display performance, and from there you choose high quality. So you can view the image at a higher quality, because I know if as a designer, when you're working on a project, so you don't want to sometimes look at a low quality image on the screen. But just to let you know that low quality image is just there for a reference. And that's InDesign's way of just giving you a feedback that how image looks. But if you want to display it in a higher quality, so you go to the object, and then you choose display performance and choose higher quality. All right, so I'm going to stop lecturing, but I want to talk about your first project, and that is going to be in InDesign. You're not going to create a 4 pages spread. I just want you to create a 2-page spread, okay? And it can be for a fashion magazine. I think one of the examples which I've seen, which I saw in this video. So that's a good example over here. Or so you can choose any image, but at least one image which you are going to use in this 2-page spread should have a transparent background, so that you can try doing a wraparound text in there. Okay. So these are just simple instructions as far as the basic subject is going to be fashion for two. So what images you use, what other content you are going to use. So I'll leave that up to you. Okay. So that is something we are going to do in InDesign. It won't be due till not. I think let's just do it at the end of next week. So we have Thursday, and then we have next Tuesday, and then Thursday. So it's just going to be 2-page content. I will let you use that. This video, as I mentioned before, I'll also try to find a link online, YouTube, or in Creative Suite podcast with Terry White. If I don't find it, I'll just put the video in there, and I'm also going to put another video. That video was done before this, but once again, the features of InDesign, which Terry White is touching on, are just the basics. So it doesn't matter which software you are using. These are the basic features, so those are available over there. So the windows might look a little bit different, like when you're creating a new document. So that has changed, but basic things are there. And so I'm also going to put that video in there. So because it was a different project, although he covers almost the same things over there, but he gives a little more details in that video. So hopefully this will help. And so we'll keep moving on. And so I don't want to spend too much time on InDesign because there are some other things for an intro class. So you will also enjoy maybe creating an animation. Okay, so we can create a simple animation. Maybe we can use Photoshop to do that, or we can even use programs like Animate. Okay, so but I don't want to throw too much stuff at you, but we'll do something simple so that you can have an idea of how how to work with these software packages. You guys can get familiar with what these tools are, and later on when you decide to move on, so you can decide which area of computer graphics you want to get into. Maybe if you are a painter, you may want to explore Photoshop more. So painting with Photoshop is another class you can take. Or if you are an illustrator, you may want to get more into Illustrator. Or if you're a graphic designer, you do logo design and things like that. So you need to learn Illustrator more. Or if you want to create illustrations, which can be very high quality illustrations for books and features, and so you can also use Illustrator for that. So different software packages do different things. There's also a little bit of an overlap between the software packages. That is fine, but at one point, so you may have to decide that which direction or which direction you need to move to specialize in. Okay. So hopefully, this class is going to give you some basics of what is there and how you can work with these software packages, and then you can choose other advanced classes. All right, so anyone has any questions? So I can see some text coming in, so chat. So the question Jesse is asking is, so is it best to crop our image in Photoshop before we take it into InDesign? That is true, but we can also crop the image in InDesign. But in InDesign, how we crop the image is by masking it out. You know, next time we are going to also cover those areas, and it will be very interesting. You will find this software, especially, you know, if you want to get into layout, a page layout. You know, if you want to design magazines, design books, or maybe design fashion brochures, or designing like annual reports for businesses and so on. So this is a good desktop publishing program to learn. There's another software package which is out there, which is quite popular on the PC side. Not that popular nowadays, but some print shops still use that. That is Coreldraw. So at this point, there was also another, actually there is still another software called Quark Express. But again, InDesign has captured the market, and as I mentioned before, it's Adobe software, so not at this point, this is the industry standard. So if you just learn this, you can't go wrong. I know that there are still some print shops which still use Quark Express, and on PC side, some are still using Corel, but you know, with InDesign you can never go wrong. All right, so we will see more of InDesign. There's a lot to learn with this program, and there are a lot of other features. We can't cover, once again, everything, but at least I will give you enough tools to get you started and move ahead. So if you guys have any questions at this time, so this will be a good time to ask those questions. If you want to, you know, do that, so you can just press your space bar and speak out, or you can just type it in the chat, and I can answer the questions. Otherwise, you know, this is the end of the lecture. I'm going to stay a little longer, just to make sure that, you know, there's always some students who will need to know more, or if they have any other questions which I can answer, so that will be a good time. But if other people, if you know what you're doing, so I'll let you go and work. And oh, before I go, one thing, on Thursday, other than touching a little more on InDesign, I do want to, I've been looking at people who are submitting their work. So I'm going to choose some of students' work, and I'm just going to open, and, you know, we are going to just talk a little about that. It's not going to be like a critique like that. So it will be more like, you know, trying to understand a little more, and, you know, just with which we can all learn. Okay.